we looked at one example of how commerce erodes the rights as laid out in the Bill of Rights. And the example we chose was the Second Amendment that does not require people have a license. Now, people will say, well, you need a license, blah, 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 blah. That's not what the Constitution said. We might believe we need a license because that's what the system is pushing. The Constitution didn't say you have to have a license to carry. It did not say that. But this is an example of how a system uses the Commerce Clause to regulate your unalienable rights as citizens. Now, Indians, again, we're not citizens. We're not supposed to be. And that's the standing that I'm looking to reestablish for myself. I no longer want to be under the federal system because I'm not supposed to be. It's not a form of rebellion. It is the standing that Indians originally were supposed to have, that they got cheated out of. So how does the Commerce Clause, so we looked at an example of how the Commerce Clause cheats United States citizens, but how does the Commerce Clause cheat American Indians? Oh, let me tell you, American Indians are getting cheated the most, because what the Commerce Clause does to American Indians, it strips them of the authority that they would have as owners of their land. That's what the Commerce Clause did to Indians. It takes away the rights of citizens, and it totally diminishes, it eradicates an Indian standing as a landowner. Everything here that is foreign should be paying some kind of rent to Indians because this is their land. So the Commerce Clause has taken Indians out of what we would call typically a landlord position. That's what the Commerce Clause does to Indians. The Commerce Clause, basically, it is doing a number on all parties to this system. So I'm going to try to explain the two mentions of Indians in the Constitution. The first mention of an Indian, which is what all black folks are, if you don't have documented proof that you're African, you are more than likely a whole American Indian. You have to have actual paperwork to show that you are African. You have to have a grandmother or grandfather. Excuse me. Okay, that means we're getting closer to the finale. So, in the first mention of Indians, that is Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. In that article, it is, well, after you understand what it's saying, that article is making it clear that Indians, number one, they are not to be enumerated. Indians were never supposed to be enumerated in any census. Number two, Indians are not taxed. They're not counted because they're not taxed. Number three, they're also not counted because they will not have any representatives in Congress. Why, why are Indians not counted in the census? Why are they not taxed? Why are they not represented in Congress? Because they are considered not to be United States citizens of any kind. We are not citizens in this system, according to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 is saying Indians are not taxed, they're not enumerated, and they're not represented in Congress. If you tax Indians, that's like taxation without representation. But Indians are not supposed to be taxed. They're not supposed to be counted in any census. Indians don't have representatives because they were to have a separate system from the United States system. This is what we were robbed of with the Commerce Clause. So now the Commerce Clause, okay, that what we just talked about, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, it mentions Indians as Indians not taxed. That's what they call it. But it doesn't say Indian tribes. It says Indians. So what they're talking about is random Indians in any state are not supposed to be grabbed into that state, even though they live there. They're not supposed to be counted in that state census. This is what the Constitution says. So that, again, that's the first mention of Indians. The first mention should be setting the stage for how we are mentioned throughout the rest of the Constitution. And we're not hardly mentioned at all because it doesn't apply to us. The Constitution really applies to immigrants who live in states created by their king. But then they didn't want the king, but they still have his states. They're still on his states. That, in my book, is a problem, but we won't even go there. But it really is telling that without a king, you wouldn't even really have a standing here. It was the king that provided you the standing, even though you allegedly broke away. But they still found a way to use commerce to make you a subject when you were supposed to be a free person. So again, how does the Commerce Clause affect Indians? So first, what does the Commerce Clause say? Basically, it says Congress has the authority to regulate commerce between Indian tribes and the states. Basically, that's roughly what Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 is talking about. It's talking about Indian tribes, specifically tribes, not just random Indians like we talked about in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, where Indians are not taxed. But they didn't say Indian tribes. Okay? So what am I saying? I'm saying that we have two different type of Indians. But what the government will do is try to make them one and try to use commerce to void Indians from controlling their land. In the first mention of Indians, obviously they would have to have their own land because they're not part of the United States system, right? Well, that's how it's supposed to be. But as we see, there's no Indians that are in charge. These federal Indians, they don't control their land. The federal government does. So how is that happening? It's happening because of the Commerce Clause. Because the Commerce Clause says Congress has the right to regulate commerce between Indian tribes and the states. The problem with that article is that it doesn't define what regulate means. So when they say that Congress or the federal government has a right to regulate commerce, exactly what do you mean? It was never defined, y'all. But it ended up, it not being defined, Congress made it simply mean that they dominate Indian tribes. Again, we want to stress that one is talking about Indian tribes. That's the Commerce Clause. But the first mention of Indians in the Indians Not Taxed Clause, it doesn't say anything about tribes. So what does that mean? That means individual Indians have better rights than Indians in tribes. And single Indians are not bound to be regulated. So that's the problem with the Constitution. It has two mentions of Indians, but one Indian is a sovereign while the Indian tribe is regulated by the feds. And anything the feds touch, they feel they own and that they have authority over it. But that's not what that first mention, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, Indians not taxed. Congress has no authority over them. Congress has authority, again, over Indian tribes. So why did they design it that way? Why does a group of Indians in a tribe end up being dominated through regulation by Congress? It's because Congress does not want a large number of Indians that you would find in a tribe. They don't want them to own land. Congress is basically out to have all of the land of the Americas. An Indian tribe would require a large batch of land that they control, not the federal government. Because Indians are not part of the federal government. Why should they be part of the federal government just because they're in a tribe, though? So there is a fundamental conflict in how the Constitution is dealing with Indians. Once again, one part of the Constitution is dealing with single Indians, Indians not taxed. Those Indians have no representation in the federal government because they're separate. But so in essence, what the Constitution is saying is, we will tolerate you being on your own only as a single Indian. If you're in a tribe, we have to regulate you. Why? It's taken away. The whole point of us having a tribe is to be dependent upon those of the tribe. But if you, the federal government, comes along and you take control of the tribe, we're just a bunch of puppets for you. We're just a bunch of subjects. We don't have any power. So it really, what I'm saying is, the Constitution is not, it's in conflict when it's dealing with Indians, because Indians should not be part of this federal system at all. But the federal government knows if we give them what they're supposed to have, which is their sovereignty, we won't be able to control their land. Any land that they're on, they're going to be like Mexico. Say now Mexico is not part of the United States. Any land that Indians are on would be not part of the United States land. The United States wants all of the land. That's why they make sure in the Constitution they are regulating tribes. And to take it a step further, they're not dealing with anything but federal tribes. So how convenient that the government really is not dealing with Indians at all, because they're only dealing with federally recognized tribes. Those tribes are created by the government. A federally recognized tribe is basically a creation of the federal government because Indians are not supposed to be under federal. What the federal did was create a group of Indians that they can say, look, we're treating them right. No, you're not. They shouldn't be under your control, point blank, period. So the government is picking and choosing which Indians it wants to deal with. Well, the big news is the doctrine of discovery has been denounced, repudiated. This shouldn't be going on anymore. The government has no legal footing to choose not to deal with Indians who are not federal. But right now they're saying, in our eyes, you don't exist. If you're not federal, we don't see you. And we're not, so since we don't see you, there's no way you can have land. We're going to keep controlling your land. It's not easy to explain, but these two mentions in the Constitution of Indians are in direct conflict with each other. Again, the government is dealing with you as a single Indian. You can be outside of the federal government. But as a group of Indians in a tribe, the federal government is trying to control you. Then you're just limiting Indians. That's all you're doing. You're limiting us and you're controlling our right to gather and be an independent tribe. Anyway, this is a little over 15 minutes. I think we'll stop here because I'm starting to repeat myself. So thank you for watching. This might be our finale. For now, we didn't even do the half an hour, so that's good. In the last finale, if this is the finale, we did a half an hour about. I think we might give you a break and maybe pick this up another time, because this is really what I really want to talk about. The two types of Indians mentioned in the Constitution: the Indians not taxed and the Indian tribes. Indians not taxed they're sovereign. They don't have representation in Congress. They don't pay taxes, and they're not enumerated. How they enumerated us, by the way, is by reclassifying us black. They had to do that because the Constitution says you're not supposed to count Indians in a census. So how did the federal government get around that? They simply started calling us black. That's how they got around. Because Indians are not supposed to be in a census. That's why they had to reclassify us black. And then once they do that, now they're pulling us into the federal system and we're getting taxed. See, that's what they do. Even if you're not officially a citizen, if they enumerate you, they're going to treat you like a citizen. They're going to tax you like a citizen. That was the whole point. Okay, so we're going to cut this video short. I'm hearing noises outside. I want to go check it out. Thank you for watching. Until next time.